Hey everyone, and welcome to the Middle Cross Moments podcast. I am your host, Tyler Hofland, and today we have a special guest. Matt Marchand is on the show. Matt takes us through his life and ministry, the things that he's done while living his life for Jesus Christ, and all of the different ways that we can feel forgiven and be advocates for others and be good members of his kingdom. Matt takes us through the things that have called him to the church, stories about when he was younger and getting into youth group and what called him to do youth ministry and adult ministry. I think it's a great show. So welcome to the show, and we are starting with Matt right now. So check it out. Matt, thank you for joining and welcome to the show.
Tyler, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to be a part of the mission. I enjoy working with youth especially, but that's what I do for a career. I advocate and work and evangelize with youth. But here we're talking about a larger church, and I'm excited about inviting people in to resources that can bring them great joy and happiness. Share a little of the treasure that I was able to find in my own life through my faith, be able to share that with others and help them find, a solid anchor or a rock to hold on to in a world that can often be chaos.
Matt, what brought you, as you look back in your youth and in your adulthood, what brought you to the church to serve in the capacity that you do?
Yeah, I was a bit of a lifer in the church. I was regularly going to church since I was a small child. Every Sunday we would go to mass and go to church. And I just found at about my early teenage years, I was offered an opportunity to be a part of something I had no idea about, something called a youth group. And in the youth group, I found great mentors from my faith. And I saw great peer-to-peer relationships, built great friendships. My best friend today came right out of that youth group. And I just fell in love with God through that. And when I fell in love with God, it really changed my life. And it made me want to share with others that kind of treasure of that relationship. The other day we had at church, we were reading the parable of person who finds the treasure in the field. Like, wouldn't you go and sell everything and buy the field? Well, it's like I was praying about that at a conference this weekend, and I was thinking of how, though you found the treasure in the field, it's so abundant it'll take care of you, but there's another treasure next to it, and you just have to invite somebody else to come sell what they have and buy that land next to it and take that treasure too, and it'll fully sustain them. And so the idea of our ministry is really to keep sustaining people, finding this treasure and helping them, guiding them, accompanying them. Say, hey, buddy, I got something for you. And hopefully they find as much joy in the faith that as I have. So that's what I like sharing, and I like seeing when people develop into that faith.
How do they find that? Like how if I am, either a 16-year-old youth or a 26-year-old adult or 36-year-old, and especially in adulthood, things go awry quickly. How do you know that you have that abundance of faith, and how can you count on that encounter with Jesus, and how do you see it? Like, what does it look like for people?
Yeah, well, if it was really easy to find, everyone would find it. So there is a challenge to it. When I was working with a group called the Salesians of Don Bosco, and they have a particular mission to the young and the poor, especially like urban areas, things like that, where you have a lot of gangs, you have a lot of kids who never really had normalcy, as we would kind of quote normalcy of family and normalcy of food security and all that kind of stuff. And so they kind of have a bad start. And so when we would say, like, how are we going to do this mission? And the common joke was, not easily. We're not going to do it easily. It's going to take some work. But I think as far as like finding power of faith to give you peace, joy, and happiness, it's in hearing. Somebody's got to tell you about it. And the person who tells you about it, the best person to tell you about it is somebody who's willing to walk with you and accompany you through that journey. I think mentorship is something that is very much diminished in our current culture. And it's something that we can renew with people who are just have open hearts to love and care for people and help guide them. And I think that's every ministry, but sometimes we kind of lose that personal relationship, that personal accompaniment. Whereas to say, hey, come with me, because my own best friend I told you was part of that youth group, and really, how did he come to his faith? He's a minister now too as well, but how did he come to faith? Is I invited him. I said, hey, come to this thing. I love it. I think you'll love it too. And I think that just walking that journey with each other, I think is important. I think that's why Jesus sent people out 2 by 2, and he never alone. Always accompanied.
Yeah, certainly when you're going through a difficult time. I know when my family and I moved to Rapid City, we had just gone through a very difficult time with my business failing in North Dakota and some of the things that brought us here. And one of the things that was prevalent to us actually was a time when we were behind the church. We took the Stations of the Cross walk up the hill, and we got to the top of the hill, and this older gentleman showed up with a walking stick kind of appearing out of the woods, and just offered to pray for us in that moment. And I'll never forget the prayer. It was kind of crazy. It was just basically help this family with whatever's on their mind and things like that. All that to say, we were going through some very difficult things in that moment, and even though that didn't take those things away from us, we were able to see Jesus's encounter with us, and that he was actually with us in that moment. We felt like that was kind of a divine intervention, if you will. And I think that's important for others as they're going through their, either trying to stay healthy and holy or trying to find their way back, as they need other people to keep them in line, if you will. And so just one moment there, you do a lot of work for the youth. Why the youth?
For me, working with the young is kind of a niche. It is the kind of thing that's like you have a lot of teachers, educators, coaches, but actually youth ministry is a unique challenge to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who are still maturing and growing in their faith. Their problems are more dramatic, to them than they are to, adults. Something that's what we might consider small is really big, but they're working through all those virtues, the virtues of resilience, the virtues of conversion, like all these small virtues. And it is truly a blessing to be able to mentor youth as they're, especially in faith, as they're maturing into who God created them to be. And in youth, you see the variations. It's easy for them to go way off the wrong side, and then sometimes be like way over here, like looking as like little holy saints or angels or something, right? So they can be on both sides of this. And for me, I like the dynamism. I like how dynamic the ministry is. I like the joy of young life, and I like to really be able to be a part of God's hand delivering the graces that hopefully will form them for life, building on strong foundations. And that's not to say that sometimes people's lives aren't built on crumbly foundations, and they have to learn how to knock some things down to build things back up. But I feel like youth are a little more open than adults can be sometimes to the accompaniment, to the openness to sharing, the openness to try something new. And it's a challenge. It's a different demographic. It's very challenging, but I just love the challenge.
Well, and I think something you said there was really interesting to me, in that youth are more open to their faith than adults are. And I think it's kind of strange in society that we have made being open about faith not as okay as not being open about faith, depending on what kind of faith you have in a lot of cases. But why do you think, from your perspective, why is it that way that youth are more open than adults?
Yeah, I think that the youth in particular, um, they don't have as much reinforcement on old habits, and part of their maturity is they put on different masks, put on different personalities. They join a club and they invest their identity into it. It's just a normal part of adolescence to try on identities and see how it fits you. I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a this. I'm going to be, the person who knows everything about the Civil War, whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. And they wrestle with that and they try to reconcile it with who they are underneath. And so, because they're willing to put on a mask for a time, there's many youth that will put on a mask and say, "I'm going to be all for Jesus," and maybe they don't always reconcile it with what's their true nature behind that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it's just the same as like I'm the athlete. Baseball is my life, right? Or soccer is my life. And so they can put that on and they try it out. And my goal is really to help them put on Christ, put on the armor of God and put on Christ, put on the Spirit for themselves so that they can then reconcile it. Is the Spirit really me? Is it really compatible with who I am? Is it going to bring me alive? Is it going to make me live? And I think the other thing I would mention here is that with the youth, they are looking for answers and they're a lot more used to accepting answers, even if those answers may or may not work for them, right? So they're going to accept an answer from a friend. This is what you need to do. They're going to accept answers from mentors, from parents sometimes, from a trusted adult. And when they're accepting those answers, right, they can see the answers that fail, and they really are exploratory in their hearts, looking for the right answers. They're trained in school from a very early age. Find the right answer.
How do parents help them along in your, both making and break them? I feel like parents have obviously a big part in their youth's uh, journey, but how do they help in your
Yeah,
experience?
no, parents are the first formators of all children, right? We like to say we like to educate children. I actually think we shouldn't call it education. I think we should call it formation. Is where we're helping them be a better human being. Where their human formation. How do you grow up? How do you take care of yourself? How do you brush your teeth? How do you wash your hair? Like all these things you have to teach kids, especially middle school kids might need the deodorant speech once in a while. But you're teaching them all those human formation things. How do you be respectful to other people, etc. And then you have like the spiritual component, and the parents really are great models for spirituality, whether they know it or not. Parents that are disinterested in the spiritual life, raise children who, may not place high importance on it right away. They may still discover a high importance, but they may not place it there right away. Then there's intellectual formation. Parents teach their kids things at home. Then we send them off to school to learn more, but we do that. And I think the last part for parents is like teaching them how to socialize. Teaching them how to build relationships. And this is why broken homes are such a big problem, because the modeling between a husband and wife who are saying to themselves, "I give all to you," and making each other the primary relationship. Obviously children are very important, but the husband and wife are the primary. And when they can demonstrate that for their children, the children learn how to make better friendships. They learn how to interact with people. They learn how to understand the mentorship of your husband and wife. It's a mutual mentorship. And I think that kind of thing leads to a wholesome character. I had a great experience this past weekend. I went to something called the Steubenville Conference. It's a Christian conference for the weekend, where the kids go and they spend their weekend to seek the Lord, find the Lord, and they pray together. And one of the things that's very common about that is they realize that they're not alone in their addictions. They're not alone in their mental anxieties, their stresses, mental illness, even. They just learn that they're not alone. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about young ministry is they all of a sudden see the rest of the world in their head and they say they're judging me, but they don't realize that everyone else, has their own drama. And a conference like that where you kind of bring that to the Lord, I've seen just so many wonderful things happen with the kids just opening their hearts and realizing, hey, it's okay to be broken, but I'm going to move from this broken to the wholeness. And that's it's such an exciting, I want to be there to help them.
I think that's awesome, and that's one of the core tenets to why this mission was built. More for adults, I would say, but the same principle applies. People go through something, or they're dealing with something, whether it's addiction or mental health or the law or whatever it is. And as a society, we tend to point the finger and say, how dare you? How do you do that? When the core to that problem is you have a broken individual, and the people pointing the finger, are also dealing with things that uh, that would fit our mission in most cases. So having that framework in place where we as a mission are helping others realize that they are not alone and there is a journey to move on from their problem. Let us help you get there is a very similar concept to what you're saying you experienced at Steubenville. I had actually been to Steubenville several times in my youth, so I can say that it's a very good conference for that, for worship and learning about yourself and learning about others and how to take on the world by yourself and with others at the same time.
Yeah, indeed. And I would say that, while I specialize in youth ministry, I've been doing ministry at large, to all people for a very long time. And one of the things you notice in working in adult ministry, adult men's ministry, adult women's ministry is you learn that a lot of the seeds of their current problems all began when they were teenagers or children. Because I like to say that the devil tries to wreck where we'll be the strongest as early as possible. So if you're meant to be a really resilient person, he's going to try to get you addicted to something as fast as they can, and I really feel that dichotomy is there of you're meant to be this and it's going to be try to sabotage here. And so a lot of people have wounds that they carry with them from early childhood and teenage years. And that can be anything from abuse to addiction to, social outcasts or whatever else. And our goal isn't necessarily to make you a teenager again, to fix it as a teenager, but is to go through the process of reconciliation. And if we can reconcile with the teenager as it's happening, it may prevent them from having self-medication kind of ideas of drug use or drinking or partying or, any other licentious behavior. And we can try to prevent that. But with adults, we can look back and we can start to see am I covering wounds? Am I covering things that I've been wounded and I've picked up this other thing to nurse it? Right. When my mother when I was young, my mother ran a daycare, and, they used to always, the kid was being fussy, you give him a pacifier and they kind of be quiet down and they're bearable, you kind of all right, they can, I don't have to listen to it. But we kind of condition ourselves to pacifiers and to, grab the bottle of milk, this is for me. I'm feeling this wound, but I'm going to have this good thing. I'm going to try to balance those two things out. And the real thing is, the real ministry for me with young people, but also with adults who are struggling, is learning to reconcile the things that has happened in their lives, even reconciling their own addictions, reconciling their own conversion or need for conversion, reconciling that with who they are today. And you can't make it go away. You can't wave a wand. There is no magic wand. There's no time machine to go back. And the pain of that doesn't go away. But we can reconcile the pain of that into a greater joy. And that's kind of the treasure in the field. That's the finding of the faith. And that's the exciting part about ministry, is to say, hey, there's a God here who loves you 100%, even when you're broken, even when you are unlovable in your own eyes, that he loves you as much as anyone else. And as much as we as Christians would say, as much as he loves his only begotten son, Jesus Christ, the Father loves you equally. And that is like mind blowing when you really think of what that means. You know, if you're in AA, you're like the God of your understanding. Well, think about a God of your understanding who loves you 100%, even though you've met no merit to deserve it. And I live in that. I love that.
Well, and I think that that's part of what we're missing too, is we make faith sound very simple a lot in, like, oh, if you just go to church, or if you just accept Jesus Christ, or if you just post about it online or something, we make it sound very simple. And in a lot of ways, it really is simple, but it's really deep at the same time. Like what you just said was pretty simple, but it's twisting, or it's believing that the God of the universe really does love you. And because of that, I am saved, and I can, encounter this and go through things and whatever. But I think people miss that part. Like, oh, I'm going to church, but I don't actually really, at the depth of my soul, believe what I'm being told. And I'm being told that it's really easy when I'm not getting that it's really easy.
Yeah, it's the word easy for us is a dangerous one, because, in some ways we think of easy as comfortable, easy as simple to do. I think one of the things is that it's simple. I think simple is a better word. There's no complexity to it. The complexity comes from us. Really, our ability to receive the good that is being given, our ability to allow ourselves to be vulnerable to the doctor, show them the wound in order for them to address the wound. I think every guy who gets close to 55 years old dreads the question for the doctor about the prostate exam. And they're like, oh no, you don't need to look there, doc, right? Because at some point we have that sense of like, well, that's private, that's me, that's mine, like nothing, doesn't happen to me, right? And we can build a wall. We can say, hey, no, this is the zone of my hurt that's never going to be opened. And so it's very simple to say God loves you 100%. But it's very complex for you to say, sit in meditation and sit for 10 minutes a day and just allow the Father in heaven to look upon you with love, like he did upon Jesus when Jesus was baptized, and he says, this is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased. Because it's hard to open your heart to say that, because the minute you do, you say, well, why would God be pleased with me? I'm an alcoholic. Why would God be pleased with me? I'm a glutton. I'm obese. Why would God be okay with me? I have sexual perversion, or I have this or that, or I'm addicted to XYZ. I can't be loved. And this is why they call it a gospel, because it's good news. But this is also why it's really hard to accept it. Because, yeah, actually you do. He does love you, like, all the way. And so that's a great exercise for anybody who's, like, struggling and, like, thinks they're worthless, or thinks, like, I can never fix myself, I can never pull myself up, is just make it a habit. Find a beautiful day, sit outside, and just allow God's love to look upon you at 100%, unjudged, unconditional. And that's a pretty powerful thing. It's something we do in our church with our Bible studies. Is that's how we have to start each day of prayer that we do. We have to allow 10 minutes just for the Father to look upon us in love, because once you understand that you are loved, then you have something to fight for,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I completely agree with that. I don't know that I've ever like as you're saying that I'm trying to picture myself, going through that or whatever. And I don't know that I've ever really looked at it that intentionally, but also in that simple of a way. So thank you for bringing that up because I think that was a really good way to characterize or to give direction, if you will, on how to experience God's love. So Matt, what do we talk a lot about advocacy and being there for others and things like that, and as we start to wrap this episode up, what how do people look for that? How do they find advocacy? What does that look like for someone?
So I would say there's two sides of advocacy. And the first side is people like you and I, who are making the intentional move to make ourselves available to help others to grow closer to the fullness of who they were made to be. Everyone who has struggles, whatever they are, realizes that there's something missing. Like I'm not complete, right? There's some deficit, and I'm trying to fill that deficit with something, or I don't know how to get out of it. And so one side of advocacy is people like you and I who are going to make ourselves available, offer friendship and offer accompaniment. We can't solve the problems. Everybody knows, those problems are very hard enough to solve from the person who has them, and they're impossible for other people to solve problems. We might be able to help you with your problem, but never solve it. That's something that has to work through reconciliation of who you are. So that's one side of advocacy. The other side of advocacy is self-advocacy. Really is when a person does allow themselves to say, "I am valuable person. I am loved, and I have worth greater than I even recognize." When they're able to identify that, then they can advocate for themselves. And I call everyone who's need to do that is to advocate for yourself and say, "I need help. I need a friend. I need someone to assist me." And I think that self-advocacy, when it meets advocacy for others, that's where a mentorship relationship can begin. This is when you're in 12-step program, you need a sponsor, and there's great logic in having a sponsor. Why? Because of the first thing, you don't show up to a meeting unless you say like, "Hey, I have a problem," right? You're already advocating for yourself by your attendance. And then by having a sponsor, now you're having another person advocating for you to stand with you. And the real trick is cooperation between both types of advocacy, the self-advocacy and allowing somebody else to accompany you. Because it's easy at some points to be like, "No, no, no, like I've had enough, get out of my life,"
Yeah.
and especially when I want this, but he's telling me not to have it, or she's telling me not to have it, you have that friction. And I just feel like that advocacy is only going to be successful in cooperation.
I think that's the very wise words. And I'm excited to watch you kind of influence and direct kind of our evangelization efforts for the mission and help them come to life. You're also like a 20 time Jackie Chan black belt style, Matt.
Yeah, well, when I was, this kind of plays into advocacy quite well, is when I was 13. I grew up in a baseball family. I would play baseball. Uh, I was never good at it. Like I think it had a lot to do with my eyesight. Like it just, even with glasses, like I still have trouble seeing the ball in the air. Like I don't know why, but it just is a thing. And I didn't have a place. I didn't have like anything for me. And next to my house was actually this karate school, Esposito's in Newton, Massachusetts. And this was like a very hardcore karate Cobra Kai kind of
Cobra
school.
Kai, yeah.
And
Johnny Lawrence.
the instructor, Joe Esposito, was like top of his game, like really awesome instructor, you know, great depth of knowledge, rising star, tournament champion, all that kind of stuff. And when I went into that school, what I really found there was a home. I felt like I belonged somewhere. And then I had something to aim my life at. I found something that I was passionate about, and that passion took me out of a lot of trouble. And also I found there great mentorship from not only Joe Esposito, who's the master instructor there, but also other instructors would take me under their wing and do that. And then I started teaching karate. And 27 years later, 30 years later, I'm a 7th degree black belt, and I've had the opportunity to repay the mentorship that I received. And just a kind of funny story, I use Cobra Kai, but when I was a kid, my parents couldn't afford karate lessons. And so my dad had to pull me out of the program, and I was devastated. So my dad went over and talked to him and said, hey, can he like clean or something? So I literally did the, LaRusso cleaning the trophies and all that kind of stuff in order to pay for my karate lessons. And it's been a real pleasure being able to accompany other kids and help them to achieve their goals and dreams too.
Yeah, no, I think that's phenomenal. Sidebar note, so a few years ago, Matt had this father-son convention, seminar, retreat thing at the church, and as part of it, we were going to do some karate on our sons and sons on their fathers. So me and Carter, my son, were there, and to this day, we use some of those very elementary level karate skills, messing around with each other that we learned that day. So it's kind of fun, kind of a neat little nugget, if you will, that about Matt, that he's lethal behind. If he's wearing a white robe with the black belt on, I would walk the other way. So
no, I'm gentle. I'm a gentle sensei.
Yeah. Awesome, Matt. Well, I appreciate you joining us today, and I think this was a great time, and we were able to share some great things with others who are going through some times, and how to just keep themselves on the right side of the tracks. So thank you very much.
Hey, yeah, do you mind if we close in a prayer? So if we can just open our hearts and minds and imagine or accept that there's a loving Father who made all things. From his throne in heaven, he's looking down upon us with 100% love, unconditional. And know that that love means more than the love that you can possibly earn here on earth, and that it's a love worth living for. And you are precious in God's eyes. God loves you. And we, ministers, are trying to share that love with you through our ministry so that you might have a happy, joyful, and wonderful life. We ask the Lord to bless all of you. Amen. And St. Augustine once said this. He said, to fall in love with God is the greatest of all romances. To seek him is the greatest adventure, and to find him, the greatest human achievement. And so I hope that many people hearing the podcast will enjoy that romance, enjoy that adventure, and enjoy that achievement.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks,
was great.
Tyler.
Hey, quick shout out to one of our sponsors. If you're thinking about buying a home, refinancing, or just want to understand your options, reach out to Dylan Newberger with Loan Depot, located in Minot, North Dakota. Dylan makes the process simple, clear, and built around you. No pressure, just real answers. Call or text him directly, and I'll drop his info in the show notes. Take that first step and see what's possible today. Hey, quick word from one of our sponsors. If your business needs custom metal fabrication done right, check out Metal Masters of Wisconsin. Specializing in stainless steel and also experts with carbon steel and aluminum. They handle small to large projects from prototype to production. They take pride in doing a good job with integrity, craftsmanship, and a commitment to something bigger than just the bottom line. If you need precision you can trust, connect with Metal Masters of Wisconsin. I'll drop their info in the show notes.